The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the land, as the people gathered around the fire. Their faces, worn from years of wandering, were filled with hope and anxiety. For centuries, they had traveled through harsh deserts, crossed endless rivers, and endured endless struggles, but the promise of a new home always lingered in their hearts. They were the Mexica, and they were searching for the land that would fulfill the prophecy that had been passed down through generations, ***, a land where an eagle would perch upon a cactus, holding a snake in its beak, ***. As the fire crackled, the old priests told stories of Aztlan, their mythical homeland, a place of lush beauty and peace. But that peace had faded, replaced by a relentless call to leave, to seek the promised land that would fulfill their destiny. The Mexica had left Aztlan long ago, led by the gods themselves. Among those gods, the one who guided them most fiercely was Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun. It was his voice that had echoed through the hearts of their ancestors, driving them forward, across mountains and through storms, never allowing them to settle until they reached the place the gods had promised. The elders spoke of the moment when Huitzilopochtli had appeared to their ancestors in a dream, a fierce warrior with eyes that burned like the sun. "Follow the eagle," he had commanded. "Where the eagle rests on the cactus, there your people shall find their home." The Mexica knew that this was not just a story, it was their fate, written in the stars, etched in their hearts. The journey would be long, and their trials would be great, but they trusted that Huitzilopochtli would lead them, that his power would protect them, and his light would guide them. For years, the Mexica wandered through hostile lands, and yet, with every step, they felt Huitzilopochtli's presence. His spirit was in the wind that swept across the desert, in the sun that burned in the sky. He was in the rhythm of the drums, the war chants that echoed through their camps, calling them to press forward. There were times when hunger gnawed at their stomachs, when thirst cracked their lips, and when despair threatened to steal their courage. But the promise of the eagle, perched on the cactus, kept them moving. Then, one fateful day, as they approached the shores of Lake Texcoco, they saw it. The moment of truth had arrived. Standing on a great hill, the Mexica saw an eagle, majestic and proud, resting on a cactus, a serpent held tightly in its beak. The dream had become real. It was no longer a distant hope or a prayer whispered into the wind, it was the very land they had been promised. Tears welled up in the eyes of the elders. The long journey, the hardships, the sacrifices, it had all led to this moment. Huitzilopochtli had fulfilled his promise. As they knelt in awe before the sight, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a fiery glow over the cactus. Huitzilopochtli's power seemed to surge through the Mexica, a divine energy that filled their bodies with strength and purpose. The land that would become Tenochtitlan, soon to be the heart of an empire, had been chosen by the gods, and the Mexica would now build their city upon it. But the arrival at this sacred spot was not the end of their struggles, it was only the beginning. Huitzilopochtli had led them to this land, but now the real test would begin. There were many challenges ahead. The waters of the lake were vast and treacherous. The land was surrounded by powerful neighbors. But as long as Huitzilopochtli was with them, they believed they could overcome anything. His presence was a constant reminder that they were never alone. They had endured the hardships of migration because Huitzilopochtli had been their guiding force, their protector. His strength was theirs, and his war cries were heard in their hearts as they built Tenochtitlan, stone by stone, temple by temple. His name was etched into their culture, a god not just of war, but of light, guiding them through the darkness of uncertainty. Every warrior, every builder, every priest saw the reflection of Huitzilopochtli in their own actions. They were the children of the sun, and they knew their destiny was tied to the strength of the god who had led them to this land. Even in the quiet moments, when the city was still and the stars shone above, they could feel his presence. It was in the burning light of the sun at dawn, in the cries of victory after battle, and in the silence of prayer before the great temple. Huitzilopochtli's spirit was woven into the very fabric of the Mexica people, and every breath they took was a tribute to the god who had given them a home. In the hearts of the Mexica, Huitzilopochtli was not just a god, he was the pulse of their existence. He was the force that had driven them from Aztlan and made them warriors in a world full of enemies. He He was the fire that burned in their hearts, the sun that shone over their city, and the eagle that watched over their future. And with his guidance, the Mexica would not just survive, they would rise, stronger and fiercer than ever before, as the people of the eagle and the cactus, the children of Huitzilopochtli. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the sound of drums echoed through the streets. The people gathered in silence, their eyes turned toward the heavens. Above them, the stars glistened, each one a reminder of the ancient stories whispered through generations. These stories were not just myths, they were the lifeblood of the Mexica, the key to understanding the world they lived in. And at the heart of it all was the story of creation, a story that began with the gods. In the beginning, there was nothing, just the endless void. But then, the gods came into being. Their presence breathed life into the darkness, shaping the world that would soon become their battleground. The Aztecs believed the world had not only been created once, but it had gone through cycles of creation and destruction. This was the first of many worlds, each one born from the ashes of the last. There were 4 suns, each one a different era in the history of the universe, each one ending in catastrophe. The first sun, the son of the jaguar, was ruled by the great god Tenochtitlan. It was a time of wild strength and brutal beauty, but it ended when jaguars came and devoured the people. The second son, the son of wind, was ruled by Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. It was a time of harmony, but the people became too proud, and the winds blew them away, scattering them into nothingness. The third son, the son of rain, was ruled by Tlaloc, the god of rain and fertility. The land was lush, the crops grew tall, and life seemed perfect, but greed and excess led to flooding, drowning everything in its wake. Finally, the fourth son, the son of water, was ruled by Panquetzaliztli, the goddess of lakes and rivers. The people were washed away in a great flood, and the world was left in ruin once again. It was only after these cycles of destruction that the gods realized the need for a new sun, one that would last. And this sun, the fifth sun, would be the one that held the future of the Mexica. Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun, would play a crucial role in this new age. He was the warrior who would battle through the darkness, bringing light to the world. His was the sun that rose every day, battling the night, fighting against the forces that sought to destroy the world. His strength was unmatched, his power unyielding. As the sun rose in the morning, it was Huitzilopochtli's fiery light that guided the Mexica people, filling them with strength and purpose. But even the great Huitzilopochtli did not stand alone. The gods of the Aztec pantheon were not isolated figures, they were a web of relationships, each one influencing the other. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, was both Huitzilopochtli's ally and rival. The two gods were opposites in many ways, yet their fates were intertwined. Quetzalcoatl was the god of wisdom, knowledge, and peace. He was the one who brought the Mexica people culture, the arts, and the teachings of the ancient ones. But where Quetzalcoatl sought balance and harmony, Huitzilopochtli was driven by war and strength. Together, they represented the two forces that shaped the world, peace and war, wisdom and strength. Tenochtitlan, the god of the night sky, was Huitzilopochtli's counterpart in the darkness. He was the god who saw into the hearts of men, the god of the mirror, who revealed the truth even when it was uncomfortable. His power was fearsome, and his actions often led to destruction. Tenochtitlan and Huitzilopochtli shared a deep and complex relationship, filled with rivalry and respect. Where Huitzilopochtli brought light, Tenochtitlan brought shadow. But in the end, both were necessary for the balance of the world. Without darkness, there could be no light. Without war, there could be no peace. Tonatiuh, the sun god of the fifth sun, was also a vital part of the cosmic struggle. Though Huitzilopochtli was the warrior who fought for the light, Tonatiuh was the face of the sun, the one who embodied its raw power. His face was fierce and unyielding, and it was he who demanded sacrifice to keep the sun rising each day. The Mexica people believed that the sun required nourishment, that only through the sacrifice of blood would the world continue to turn. And it was to Huitzilopochtli that they turned in prayer, asking for the strength to offer these sacrifices in his name. But the relationship between these gods wasn't always one of harmony. Rivalries ran deep, and the struggles between them were fierce. Quetzalcoatl's peaceful nature often clashed with Huitzilopochtli's warlike spirit. Tezcatlipoca's trickery and deceit were a constant challenge to Huitzilopochtli's strength and honor. Yet, despite their differences, these gods were not enemies. They were part of a greater, cosmic cycle, each one playing its role in the unfolding story of creation. The Mexica believed that the gods were not distant, cold beings. They were part of the very fabric of life. The cycles of creation and destruction, of life and death, were reflections of the divine struggle that played out in the heavens. Each day, Huitzilopochtli fought against the darkness, his battle with the night sky a reminder to the Mexica people of their own struggles, their own fight for survival. His strength was their strength. His light was their light. In every battle fought, and every sacrifice made, the Mexica could feel the presence of the gods. They were not just stories, they were forces that shaped their lives, guiding them in moments of peace and in moments of war. And in the heart of it all stood Huitzilopochtli, the warrior son, who gave them the courage to face the challenges of the world, to endure the cycles of creation and destruction, and to rise again, no matter how many times the world might fall. The night was heavy with silence, the kind of stillness that only the gods could feel. In the heart of the earth, where the world began, something stirred. A woman, standing tall and mighty, cloaked in the ancient wisdom of the land, gave a gentle sigh. She was Coatlicue, the earth goddess, a mother who cradled the entire world in her embrace. But tonight, her heart was not peaceful. Her body ached in a way that only the divine can understand, for she was about to give birth, not to a child like any other, but to something extraordinary. It had started with a simple task. While sweeping the temple, Coatlicue had discovered a ball of feathers, a gift from the heavens. She took it in her hands, marveled at its beauty, and placed it in her chest. She did not know it then, but that moment would change everything. For from this mysterious act, the divine spark ignited, and she became pregnant with a child destined to change the fate of the world. As the days passed, Coatlicue's body swelled with the presence of the child. But not all the gods were pleased with this. In the sky above, Coatlicue, Coatlicue's daughter, looked down with envy. Coatlicue, the moon goddess, had always been proud, beautiful, and powerful. She had never known competition in her world, for she was the shining light in the night sky, admired by all who looked upon her. But now, her mother, the earth itself, carried a new power, a power that threatened to overshadow her own. Coatlicue's jealousy festered, growing into a storm of bitterness. She could not stand the thought of a new god being born to take her place. A child, born in the earth's womb, would be a rival, a challenge to her dominance. Her heart hardened with rage, and she gathered her brothers and sisters, the stars and warriors who stood at her command, to wage a war against their mother. It was a betrayal that would echo through the ages. When Coatlicue gave birth, the world trembled. The child, a son, emerged with the fierce light of a warrior in his eyes. His name was Huitzilopochtli. He was not like other children, he did not cry or whimper. Instead, he stood tall and strong, fully formed, his body wrapped in the fire of the sun. He was the warrior, born to fight, born to protect. The moment he opened his eyes, he could see the darkness of the world, the forces that threatened to tear it apart. But as he looked around, he saw not only the beauty of the earth, but the betrayal that had already begun to unfold. Coatlicue, her jealousy now fully consumed, led her army toward Coatlicue, intending to destroy the child before he could rise. The gods had known that Huitzilopochtli's birth would bring great change, but no one could have predicted the violent conflict that would follow. Huitzilopochtli, young and fierce, understood the danger. He could feel his mother's pain and fear. Without hesitation, he reached for the weapon that had been given to him at birth, a weapon of divine fire, forged from the very heart of the sun itself. It was his destiny to protect the earth, to protect his mother, and to destroy the threat that had risen from within his own family. As the battle raged on, the sky itself seemed to darken. The stars, Coatlicue's army, glistened coldly above, poised to strike. The moon goddess, with her warriors in tow, descended with a cry of fury. The world held its breath. But Huitzilopochtli was no mere child. With the power of the sun coursing through his veins, he charged forward with the strength of 1,000 warriors. His first strike cut through the darkness. His enemies faltered, their once confident steps faltering in the face of his radiant fury. Quetzalcoatl, though fierce and determined, was no match for the son of the earth and sun. With a cry that split the heavens, Huitzilopochtli fought with all his might, his blade flashing like lightning. One by one, he cut down the stars, his own siblings, who had betrayed him and his mother. But it was his sister, Quetzalcoatl, whom he faced last. As she stood before him, her face filled with rage, she knew that this would be the final battle, a battle between two sides of the same divine family. She had once been a goddess of great beauty and power, but now, in this moment, she was a foe to be defeated. Huitzilopochtli struck with precision, his sword flashing through the air, and with a single blow, he severed his sister's head from her body. Her form fell to the earth, her body breaking into pieces that scattered across the land. The stars that had once been her followers scattered in fear, and the moon itself seemed to lose its shine, its light now dimmed by the tragic death of its goddess. As Quetzalcoatl's body lay broken, Huitzilopochtli stood over her, his chest heaving with the weight of the battle. His victory was not just a triumph over his sister, it was a triumph over the forces of jealousy, darkness, and destruction. The sun would rise again, as it always did, but this time, it would rise with a new strength, a new purpose. Huitzilopochtli's victory was not without cost. The loss of his sister weighed heavily on him. She had been his family, and though she had sought to destroy him, he had not wanted her to fall. But he understood that the forces of darkness had to be vanquished for the light to prevail. And in his victory, he was not just defending his mother and the earth, he was securing the future of the world itself. From that moment on, Huitzilopochtli became not just a son, but a god of war. His light would shine over the Mexica people, guiding them to their destiny. He would lead them into battle, not with vengeance, but with the strength of the sun in his heart. And in the silent hours of the night, when the moon seemed distant and cold, they would remember his name, not just as a warrior, but as the protector of all life on earth. The earth trembled, a shiver running through the very bones of the world. Quetzalcoatl, the earth goddess, stood on the sacred mountain, her heart heavy with a strange new sensation. She had been sweeping the temple, as she always did, when she felt it, an unfamiliar stirring inside her, like something ancient and powerful beginning to wake. A ball of feathers, delicate yet pulsing with an undeniable force, had fallen from the sky and landed at her feet. The feathers shimmered in the light, each one an impossible blend of colors that seemed to call to her. She didn't question it. With hands that had touched the soil of the world, she gently cupped the ball to her chest, feeling its warmth seep into her skin. What happened next was beyond anything she had ever known. The earth groaned, the sky shifted, and from the very depths of her being, a child began to grow, a child who would change everything. As the days passed, Quetzalcoatl's belly swelled, and with it, the certainty that something extraordinary was on the way. A child was coming into the world, not like any other, but one who would bring a force of change that the gods themselves could not predict. She did not know yet what he would become, only that his birth would mark the beginning of something vast and unstoppable. But not all the gods watched this new birth with joy. From the heights above, in the sky that was always full of light, Quetzalcoatl, the goddess of the moon, saw her mother's swelling form and felt a dark seed of jealousy grow in her heart. She had always been the radiant one, the one the people looked to in awe. She had been the firstborn, the favored daughter, and the thought of a new child stealing her place, overshadowing her in her mother's eyes, filled her with fury. Quetzalcoatl's jealousy burned. She turned to her brothers and sisters, the stars, the warriors who followed her in the heavens, and began to stir them to action. She would not let this new child take what was rightfully hers. She would destroy him before he had a chance to rise. She gathered her forces, and together they descended, a vast army of stars, shining cold and distant in the dark sky. Meanwhile, Quetzalcoatl, blissfully unaware of her daughter's plans, felt a deep connection to the child growing inside her. The earth itself seemed to pulse in rhythm with the child's movements. And when the time came, Coatlicue gave birth, not to a helpless infant, but to a warrior, strong, full of fire and power, as though he had been waiting, fully formed, for this moment. His name was Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war, and from the very first moment, he was different. There was no crying, no softness. He was a warrior, fierce and unrelenting, his eyes blazing with the fire of the sun itself. But even as he took his first breath, there was no peace. Coatlicue and her army of stars had arrived. The rage in her heart had led her to betrayal, and now she sought to destroy her own brother, the child born to the earth. The heavens quaked with the sound of her army descending, stars blazing as they moved toward the sacred mountain where Coatlicue stood. Huitzilopochtli felt the threat the moment it arrived. He felt his mother's fear, her pain, and a deep, protective urge welled up within him. He knew that he was the only one who could stop this, that his destiny had led him to this moment, to face the challenge that his own sister had brought. And so, without hesitation, the warrior god rose. His body, wrapped in the energy of the sun itself, burned with a fire so bright that even the heavens seemed to step back. He took up the weapon that had been given to him, the weapons of the sun, blazing and powerful. Huitzilopochtli knew no fear. There was only his duty to protect his mother, the earth, and the balance of life itself. With one mighty step, he charged. The ground trembled under his feet as he moved with the speed of a storm, fierce and unstoppable. The stars that followed his sister fell back in fear, but Coatlicue, proud and full of rage, refused to retreat. She stood her ground, her beauty and power shining coldly in the darkness. She believed that she could defeat him, that she could crush the child born to outshine her. But Huitzilopochtli was no ordinary child. He was a god, born with the strength of the sun, and he would not be stopped. The battle between brother and sister was swift and brutal. The sky cracked with the sound of their clash. With every strike, Huitzilopochtli's power grew, while Coatlicue form began to break. She had led her forces to destroy him, but she did not anticipate his strength, his will to protect, to survive. The moment came when Huitzilopochtli's blade, forged from the sun's fire, struck through the night, cutting through the very essence of his sister. In one blow, Coatlicue was severed, her head flying from her body, her form shattered like the stars themselves. Her warriors, watching in horror, scattered. The moon goddess fell, not as a radiant force, but as broken pieces, her body falling to the earth in a rain of light and shadow. As her form crumbled, the sky seemed to weep. The stars dimmed, their light fading in mourning. The moon, once bright and proud, was forever changed. And Huitzilopochtli stood alone, his chest heaving with the weight of the battle. He had done what had been necessary. His sister had been a threat to the balance, and he had destroyed that threat. But as he looked upon the shattered pieces of her body, a deep sorrow filled his heart. She had been his family. She had been his sister. Yet, in the end, the battle had been one of necessity. There was no room for jealousy in a world where the forces of light and darkness must always fight for survival. Huitzilopochtli, the warrior god, had risen to his destiny, not with joy, but with the somber knowledge that sometimes the fiercest battles must be fought even against those we love most. And as the stars above scattered, and the sun rose once more, the world knew that Huitzilopochtli was not just a god of war. He was the protector of life, the fierce light that would always rise again, no matter how dark the night. The sky was dark, the world silent, waiting. For a brief moment, there was nothing, no warmth, no light, just a cold emptiness that stretched across the land. Then, as though a spark had been struck deep in the heart of the earth, a brilliant light broke through the blackness. It was not just the first light of dawn. It was a force, a power, rising from the depths of the universe. It was the sun, the most vital, most ancient of all things, bringing life to the world. And standing in the midst of that divine light, rising with it, was Huitzilopochtli, the warrior god. Every day, Huitzilopochtli fought a battle no one could see but everyone felt. As the sun moved across the sky, it was more than just a cycle of day and night. It was a constant war between light and darkness, between life and death, between the forces that sought to destroy the world and the protector who would stop them. Huitzilopochtli was that protector. The sun's daily journey was his journey. He was not just riding the sky, he was fighting, defending the world from the forces of chaos and night that would swallow it whole. His battle was fierce. Every morning, as the first rays of sunlight broke through the horizon, the forces of darkness rose, trying to drag the world back into their cold, lifeless embrace. But Huitzilopochtli would not allow it. With every step, every move, he pushed the darkness back, driving it away with the fire of the sun that blazed in his heart. His struggle was endless, and yet he never wavered. As the day moved on, Huitzilopochtli was always present, always there, holding the line between life and death, always rising to meet the darkness again and again. His daily journey was not just a symbol of the rising and setting of the sun, it was a reflection of the eternal battle between life and destruction. Huitzilopochtli knew that if he ever faltered, even for a moment, the world would fall into shadow. And so, he fought on, never resting, never stopping. His light would always rise, because without it, the world would die. But there was more to his journey than this daily struggle. The myths of the gods tell of a time when Huitzilopochtli's rise was not just about protecting the earth, but about claiming his rightful place as the sun god. He had always been powerful, always radiant, but it was only after his victory over his sister Coelzaqui that he was crowned as the god of the fifth sun, the sun that would lead the world into its present age. The story of the 5 suns is ancient, passed down through generations like a fire that cannot be extinguished. Each sun represents a different age, a different chapter in the world's story. The first 4 suns had come and gone, each one destroyed by a great cataclysm. The first sun was torn apart by jaguars, the second by wind, the third by fire, and the fourth by water. The gods themselves had been cast down, and the world had been left to darken. But the 5th sun, the sun that Huitzilopochtli protected, was different. It was not just another cycle. It was the last chance for the world, the final age that would determine whether the earth would continue or be lost forever. And Huitzilopochtli knew it. He understood the weight of his duty, the weight of his power. He was the sun's protector, its heart and soul, and he had to rise, every day, not just for the people, but for the future of everything. To become the sun god of the 5th sun, Huitzilopochtli had to prove his strength, his determination, and his willingness to sacrifice everything for the world. The gods had gathered to decide who would be worthy to light the sky, to bring the world back to life after the destruction of the previous suns. Many gods had offered themselves, many had stepped forward, but only one could take the place of the sun. Huitzilopochtli had been tested before. He had fought the darkness, defeated his enemies, and proved himself as a warrior. But this test was different. The gods demanded that the one who would become the sun must be willing to give up something dear, something vital. And so, in the presence of the other gods, Huitzilopochtli chose to sacrifice. He gave up the very essence of his being, his humanity, his mortal connections, to rise as the sun, a divine force whose light would never fade. In that moment, as the light of the sun began to blaze across the sky, something in the world shifted. The 5th sun had begun. The earth, which had been lost in shadow for so long, now had a chance to live again. Huitzilopochtli had taken his place among the stars, but he had not done so for glory or power. He had done it for the world, for the people who would walk upon it, for the creatures who would breathe its air, for the plants that would reach for the sky. As the sun climbed higher, as the light bathed the earth in its warm embrace, the people knew the truth of Huitzilopochtli's sacrifice. They knew that every dawn was a reminder of his strength, his unwavering resolve, his eternal fight against the forces of darkness. The sun was not just a light in the sky, it was his spirit, his power, his soul, shining down to guide and protect. The people would offer sacrifices to him, not out of fear, but out of gratitude, for the sun that rose every day, for the God who fought tirelessly to keep them safe. They would honor him in battle, in prayer, and in song, knowing that each moment of daylight was a gift, a miracle that had been won by the God who refused to let the world fall into darkness. But even as the sun blazed across the sky, Huitzilopochtli's struggle never ceased. Each day, the forces of darkness gathered, waiting for their chance to return. But every time, Huitzilopochtli was there, rising to meet them with the fire of the sun in his eyes, his strength unwavering. And as long as he fought, as long as the sun rose and fell, the earth would live, because Huitzilopochtli's battle was a battle that would never end. It was the eternal fight for light, for life, for hope. And the world would never stop needing him. The wind howled across the desert, stirring the sands of Aztlan, the sacred homeland of the Mexica people. For years, they had lived in peace there, but the time had come for them to leave. The land, once bountiful, had begun to grow cold and unyielding. The gods had spoken, and their words were clear. It was time to move, to find the land that had been promised to them. And they would not walk this path alone. Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war, had chosen to lead them. His presence was a fire in the hearts of the Mexica, a blazing light that burned through the darkness. The god had told them that they would find their new home, but it would not be easy. They would face hardship, struggle, and uncertainty. But with Huitzilopochtli guiding them, they knew they could not fail. The journey was long. The Mexica traveled across the vast, empty plains, the weight of their ancestors' hopes pressing upon them. They were a people without a home, wandering through the wilderness, their hearts filled with doubt and longing. But even in the darkest moments, they could feel the divine presence of Huitzilopochtli leading them forward. His guidance came not in words, but in signs, omens that would appear when they needed them most. It was a time when the world felt uncertain, and the Mexica began to wonder if they would ever find the place where they truly belonged. They had heard tales of a land where an eagle perched on a cactus, a land where their people would flourish and become mighty. But for years, they had found no such place. Every stop seemed to lead them further into despair, the land growing more barren, the nights colder. Yet still, they marched on, driven by the promise of Huitzilopochtli. Then, on a night when the stars shone like forgotten dreams, it happened. A vision, a sign, as clear as the sun that rises after a long night. They had camped by a lake, the air still and heavy with the weight of silence. In the distance, the Mexica chieftains gathered around the fire, speaking of the trials they had endured, the hardships they had faced. Some doubted their journey, some questioned whether they had misread the signs. But then, it appeared. High above them, a great eagle soared into the night sky, its wings spread wide and powerful. It circled, its shadow cutting through the moonlight. Then, as if guided by some unseen force, the eagle descended, landing on a cactus that rose stark against the sky. The image was unforgettable, a symbol of strength and hope, of life and perseverance, standing tall against the darkness. The people fell silent, their eyes wide with wonder. The eagle, perched upon the cactus, was the sign they had been waiting for. Huitzilopochtli had led them to this moment, showing them the way to their promised land. The eagle, a creature of both strength and beauty, was the messenger of the sun god, signaling that they had finally found the place where they would build their future. The vision of the eagle was not just a bird. It was the embodiment of Huitzilopochtli's promise. The Mexica knew that the eagle on the cactus was more than a sign of direction, it was a declaration of their destiny. It was as if the god himself had reached down, taking the form of the eagle, and told them that this was the land where they would rise, where their people would flourish, where they would build a mighty civilization. The cactus, the steadfast symbol of resilience and survival in the harshest of lands, was a promise that they, too, would endure. The Mexica felt a surge of energy, their spirits reignited. The weariness that had clung to them for so long seemed to vanish in the face of the sign. They had been lost, but now they knew the way. The eagle on the cactus was more than a simple vision, it was their future, their salvation. It was a call to rise, to take the land that had been promised to them by Huitzilopochtli, and to claim their place in the world. The following days were filled with renewed purpose. The Mexica walked with a new sense of confidence, their steps lighter, their hearts bolder. The land they sought was not far now. They could almost feel it beneath their feet, the earth waiting for them, ready to receive them. But the journey was still difficult. There were trials ahead, challenges that would test their resolve. But with the sign of the eagle in their hearts, they pressed on, knowing that the god of war was with them. And so, through the deserts and mountains, through the valleys and rivers, they moved forward. They passed through lands that were foreign to them, each one presenting its own challenges, its own dangers. But each time the Mexica faced adversity, they remembered the vision of the eagle. It was a reminder of who they were and who they were destined to become. They were the people of the sun, guided by Huitzilopochtli, and they would not be stopped. Finally, after years of wandering, the Mexica arrived at the Valley of Mexico. The land was rich, fertile, and full of promise. It was here that they would build their great city, Tenochtitlan. The vision of the eagle on the cactus had been fulfilled. They had found their promised land, and in the heart of that land, they would honor the God who had guided them there. The story of the Mexica migration is one of faith, perseverance, and divine guidance. Huitzilopochtli had not simply led them with signs and visions, he had led them with the fire of the sun, the power of the eagle, and the promise of a bright future. Through darkness and uncertainty, they had found the strength to continue, and in the end, they had been rewarded with a land that would become the cradle of their civilization. The eagle on the cactus was more than just a sign. It was a testament to the power of belief and the enduring connection between the Mexica people and the gods who watched over them. The beating of drums echoed through the city, a rhythm that pulsed in the very bones of Tenochtitlan. It was a sound that carried the weight of centuries, of blood, of sacrifice, of triumph. The people moved through the city, heads held high, eyes focused on the center where the great temple was rising, a temple dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the god who had led them from the ashes of their former life to the land of promise. The Templo Mayor, its stones still being laid, already stood as a monument to their victory, their faith, and their unshakable bond with their God. The city was alive with the sound of construction, the laughter of children, and the murmurs of elders telling stories of their long journey. But it was the Templo Mayor that commanded the most attention. Towering above everything else, its grandeur spoke not only of the greatness of Tenochtitlan, but also of the greatness of Huitzilopochtli. The temple was his domain, the heart of his power on earth, and from it, he would continue to protect his people, ensuring that their city remained a beacon in the world. As the stones were placed one by one, the Mexica workers knew that what they were building was far more than just a structure. It was a sacred place, a space where the God would be honored, where his will would be made known. Every inch of the temple, from its foundations to its towering steps, was a reflection of the Mexica's devotion to Huitzilopochtli. And within that sacred space, there would be offerings, gifts of war, of battle, of strength, because it was in war that the god found his true expression. The temple was designed with purpose, its two main levels representing the two worlds that Huitzilopochtli ruled over. At the top, on the highest platform, there was a shrine dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, where priests performed ceremonies to honor the god and call upon his power. But this wasn't just a place of peace, it was a place of war. For Huitzilopochtli was not just the god of the sun, but the god of warriors, the one who led his people to victory in battle, the one who guided their hands as they fought to secure the future of their city and their civilization. The temple's importance was not only spiritual, it was political. It stood as a reminder of the Mexica's strength and their divine right to rule. From the temple's high steps, the rulers of Tenochtitlan could look out over the city and beyond, their gaze resting on the lands they had conquered and the lands they would yet claim. It was from this place that they would direct their military campaigns, knowing that Huitzilopochtli's blessing was behind them, that he would guide their spears and sharpen their arrows. The Templo Mayor was not just the center of the city, it was the center of their world, where the spiritual and the political were inseparable. And it was here, in the shadow of the great temple, that the warriors gathered. They would come from all corners of the city, ready to lay their lives down in the service of Huitzilopochtli. Each warrior knew that their strength was not their own, it came from the god himself. Their courage, their ability to fight, to conquer, to claim victory, were all gifts given to them by Huitzilopochtli. The warriors did not just go to war for glory or wealth, they went because it was their sacred duty, their chance to honor the god who had brought them to this land. In the days leading up to battle, the warriors would climb the steps of the Templo Mayor, each one carrying the weight of the city's hopes and prayers. At the top, they would offer sacrifices to Huitzilopochtli, sometimes in the form of flowers or food, but often in the form of blood, offering the god what he needed to keep the sun burning bright. to ensure his power would never fade. These sacrifices were not acts of terror or cruelty, they were acts of love, of devotion, and of gratitude. The warriors knew that without Huitzilopochtli, they would be nothing. He was the source of their strength, their inspiration, their courage. When the battle drums rang out, the warriors of Tenochtitlan marched forward with a single purpose, to claim victory in the name of their god. The battlefields were not just places of blood and steel, but sacred ground, where Huitzilopochtli's will was made manifest. And every victory, every conquered city, was a testament to the god's power and favor. When the Mexica defeated their enemies, they did not simply take their land, they took their enemies' spirits, offering them up to Huitzilopochtli, sending their souls to the heavens in the service of the god of war. The Templo Mayor was not only the site of worship, it was the very soul of the Mexica civilization. It was a place of connection, a place where the divine and the human intertwined. The sacrifices offered on its steps, the chants and prayers that rose from its altars, were not just rituals. They were expressions of the Mexica's unwavering faith, their belief that they were chosen by the gods to rule and protect this land. As the sun set over Tenochtitlan, casting long shadows over the city, the Templo Mayor stood in the center of it all, silent, powerful, a symbol of the eternal bond between Huitzilopochtli and his people. The glow of the setting sun bathed the temple stones in gold, as if to remind everyone who looked upon it that the god's presence was never far, that his power and protection were always there. It was a reminder that the Mexica were not alone in the world. Huitzilopochtli was with them, watching over them, leading them to greatness. And as the city fell silent at night, the echoes of the day's battles, the songs of victory, and the prayers of devotion still rang through the air. The Templo Mayor was more than just a building, it was a living, breathing testament to the Mexica's faith, to their God, and to their unbreakable spirit. It was a place where the power of Huitzilopochtli was made flesh, a place where every stone told the story of their rise and their strength, a story that would never be forgotten. The air was thick with anticipation, the weight of what was to come pressing down on every soldier's shoulders. In the stillness before battle, there was a moment of quiet reflection, as warriors took their final breaths, each inhaling deeply as if drawing strength from the earth itself. They knew what was expected of them, the glory of victory, the honor of their people, and the favor of Huitzilopochtli, the god who would stand with them in the heat of battle. His power coursed through their veins, pushing them forward, making their hearts beat as one with the rhythm of the drums that echoed across the land. For the Mexica, war was not just a means of conquest, it was a sacred duty, a divine calling. It was not just about capturing territory or securing wealth, it was about honoring their god, Huitzilopochtli, who had guided them through so many battles, who had led them to the land of Tenochtitlan and made them rulers of the Valley of Mexico. In every swing of the sword, and every clash of shields, Huitzilopochtli was there, watching, guiding, ensuring that the warriors' strength and courage would not falter. The warriors of the Mexica saw themselves as the hands of Huitzilopochtli, carrying out his will on earth. They knew that when they went to battle, it was not just their own blood that would be spilled, it was an offering to the god, a way to honor his power and keep his favor. They believed that each drop of blood, each fallen enemy, was a gift to Huitzilopochtli, a way of feeding him, of ensuring that the sun would rise again the next day. Before they even stepped onto the battlefield, the warriors would turn to the temple and offer prayers and sacrifices to Huitzilopochtli, asking for his strength, for his guidance, for his protection. Some would paint their faces with symbols of the god, his image marked on their bodies like a shield. The air would be thick with incense, the scent of burning copal filling their nostrils, and the sound of chants would fill the sacred space as the warriors offered their devotion to the god. They knew that their fate was not just in their hands, it was in the hands of Huitzilopochtli. The ritual was part of the Mexica's deep belief that war was sacred. They did not fight for simple conquest, they fought to honor the gods, to ensure that the sun would rise, that the world would continue to exist. War was a necessity, not just for the Mexica to expand their empire, but to maintain the balance of the universe itself. The more blood they spilled, the stronger Huitzilopochtli became, and the stronger he became, the more power the Mexica had to defend their people and their land. As the battle began, the warriors surged forward, their hearts beating in time with the drums that signaled the beginning of the fight. Their movements were precise, calculated. The Aztec warriors fought with a fervor, a passion that came from the depths of their souls. Their spears were extensions of their will, their obsidian-edged blades gleamed with the light of the sun, and their shields bore the marks of the gods themselves. Each movement was a reflection of their devotion, each strike of the sword was a prayer sent up to Huitzilopochtli. When they faced their enemies, it was not just a fight for land, it was a sacred contest between the Mexica and the forces of darkness. Huitzilopochtli, the sun god, led the Mexica into battle against the forces that threatened to extinguish the light. The sun, as it rose each morning, symbolized the god's victory over the darkness, and each battle the Mexica fought was seen as a small piece of that eternal conflict. For the Mexica, every enemy slain was another victory for the sun, another moment when Huitzilopochtli defeated the darkness. The ritual of warfare was not only physical, it was also spiritual. As warriors fought, they knew that their bodies were vessels of the divine. They believed that they were not merely fighting for their own survival or that of their people, they were fighting to ensure that the gods remained strong, that the sun continued to rise. When the battle reached its climax, when the enemies were broken and scattered, the warriors would capture their prisoners, for the Mexica did not see death as an end, but as a way to feed the gods. The prisoners were taken to the temple, where they would be sacrificed, their hearts offered up to Huitzilopochtli as a tribute to the sun god. This act was a way of ensuring that the cycles of life and death remained in balance, that the world would continue to turn, and that the Mexica would have the strength to fight on. But the warriors did not fear death. For them, death was just another battle, another step in the eternal struggle between light and darkness. In the face of their enemies, they were fearless, knowing that their souls would ascend to the heavens to join the God who had guided them. The courage to face death without hesitation, to charge into battle with the ferocity of a god, came from their belief in Huitzilopochtli's power. They were warriors of the sun, and as long as the sun burned bright, they would never be defeated. Every victory, every conquest, was a tribute to Huitzilopochtli. The Mexica Empire expanded, its borders stretching farther and farther, all in the name of the god who had protected them from the beginning. The warriors' devotion to him was unwavering, and with each battle fought, with each sacrifice made, they proved their loyalty to the God who had led them through every trial. In the heat of battle, when the world seemed to narrow to just the clash of weapons and the cries of warriors, the Mexica knew that Huitzilopochtli was with them. His presence was felt in the wind, in the rising sun, in the hearts of those who fought with his name on their lips. The battle was his, the victory was his, and the Mexica were his chosen people, chosen to carry out his will on earth. For in the end, it was not just about winning, it was about fulfilling their sacred duty, and the Mexica understood that they were fighting not just for their empire, but for the God who had given them everything. The sound of drums echoed across the land, reverberating through the earth and sky. The people of the Mexica knew what this meant. War was on the horizon, but not just any war. This was a war of blood, of sacrifice, of devotion. These were the flower wars. Battles fought not for territory, not for treasure, but for something far more sacred, captives to honor the gods. And at the heart of this ritual warfare stood Huitzilopochtli, the god of war, whose influence guided every spear, every sword, and every soul. It was not a war driven by the thirst for land, nor was it a war of hate. The flower wars were different. They were wars of the heart, of the divine, fought with a singular purpose, to capture enemies alive, not to kill. The Mexica warriors fought not with the aim of victory in the traditional sense, but for something much more profound, captives to sacrifice. The enemy's death was not the ultimate goal, for it was not in death that honor was found. No, it was in offering life, in offering the blood of the captured, that the gods were honored. The Mexica believed that life and death were part of a sacred cycle, a cycle that was governed by Huitzilopochtli. He, as the god of war, was not just the god of violence, he was the god of life and death, the one who ensured the continuity of the universe. The blood spilled in battle, the lives taken, were offered as nourishment for the gods, so the sun would rise and the world would continue. The Flower Wars were battles fought not for conquest, but for the divine exchange of life and death. In the heat of battle, the warriors fought with a fierce yet controlled intensity. They did not seek to annihilate the enemy but to subdue, to take prisoners. Their spears were sharp, but they aimed carefully. Each strike was calculated, designed to incapacitate rather than destroy. The goal was to take the captives back to the sacred city, Tenochtitlan, where they would be offered to Huitzilopochtli in a ritual of sacrifice. These captives were not enemies, they were gifts for the gods, messengers of life, their blood the offering that would ensure the gods remained strong. And Huitzilopochtli's presence was ever felt on the battlefield. It was said that the god watched over the warriors, guiding their hands as they fought, filling their hearts with courage and strength. When a warrior captured his first prisoner, he was said to have received a blessing from the god himself, for the act of capturing a living soul was sacred. The warriors, draped in their feathers and shields, moved like an extension of the god's will, their bodies strong and unwavering, each movement infused with the knowledge that they were fulfilling a divine purpose. With each captive taken, they earned not only the favor of their people but the favor of Huitzilopochtli. But the Flower Wars were not just about the warriors. These wars had deep political and religious roots, intertwined in the fabric of Aztec society. Politically, the Flower Wars were a way to maintain control over neighboring cities and ensure a steady supply of captives. These wars helped solidify the power of the Mexica, reinforcing their dominance while also establishing a structure of alliances and enemies that could be used to manipulate and control the region. Cities that participated in the Flower Wars were not seen as enemies, but as sacred participants in the cosmic dance of life and death. Those who lost in battle were not dishonored, they were honored for their sacrifice. Religiously, the wars were a means to maintain the favor of the gods, particularly Huitzilopochtli. The Mexica believed that without sacrifices, the gods would grow weak and the sun would cease to rise. Without Huitzilopochtli's strength, the universe itself would fall into chaos. So, the Flower Wars were a way to ensure the gods remained strong, to keep the sun rising every day. The captured prisoners, taken alive in battle, were not enemies to be destroyed, but offerings to nourish the gods, to feed the sun, to keep the balance of the world intact. The political and religious motivations were inseparable. The Flower Wars allowed the Mexica to expand their influence, to establish dominance over surrounding peoples, and to maintain their position as the rulers of the Valley of Mexico. Yet, at the same time, they reinforced the sacred nature of the Mexica's relationship with the gods, reminding the people that their power was not just earthly, but divine. Huitzilopochtli was not only their protector in battle, he was the reason they fought. His favor ensured their success, and his power bound them all together. The sacrifices were not just physical offerings, they were symbolic acts that embodied the Mexica's devotion to Huitzilopochtli. The rituals that followed the capture of prisoners were deeply moving, emotional experiences. The high priests would prepare the captives for sacrifice, leading them to the top of the Great Pyramid, where the light of the sun would shine down. The warriors would stand in the shadows, watching as the priests made their offerings, knowing that their actions would ensure the continued favor of the gods. In those moments, the boundaries between life and death blurred, and the Mexica felt as if they were standing on the edge of eternity, connected to the divine in a way that transcended the physical world. Through the Flower Wars, the Mexica became a people defined by their relationship with their gods. Their strength in battle was not just a result of their military prowess, it was a result of their belief, their devotion, and their understanding of the world as a sacred place. Huitzilopochtli was not just the god of war, he was the god of life, of the sun, and of the balance of the universe. Every prisoner taken, every battle fought, was a reminder that the Mexica's power came not from their weapons, but from their devotion to the divine. The Flower Wars were not about conquest, they were about devotion, about sacrifice, about ensuring that the gods remained strong and that the sun would rise again. In the heart of Tenochtitlan, where the stone temples kissed the sky and the air was thick with incense, the god Huitzilopochtli stood both mighty and mysterious. His presence was not only felt in the hearts of the people, but seen in the art that adorned the great city, expressions of faith, power, and awe. His form was immortalized in sculptures and carvings, his image etched into the minds of those who walked beneath his watchful gaze. These depictions were not just art, they were the very soul of the Mexica people, the symbol of their warrior spirit and divine connection. Every image of Huitzilopochtli told a story. The hummingbird, a symbol of his swift and fierce nature, often perched at the edge of the temple walls, its wings outstretched, capturing the very essence of Huitzilopochtli's speed and unyielding determination. The hummingbird was not just a bird, it was a messenger between worlds, a creature that hovered at the border of life and death. It represented Huitzilopochtli's tireless pursuit of victory, his rapid and unstoppable force. Like the bird darting through the air, he would strike down his enemies with the same sudden ferocity. But there was more to his imagery than just the delicate bird. As the god of war, Huitzilopochtli was also depicted as a fierce warrior, his body armored with the power of the sun. His face, often stern and unyielding, was the face of a leader, a protector, and a fighter. His eyes, burning with the intensity of the midday sun, held the unwavering determination of a god who could never be defeated. In his warrior form, Huitzilopochtli became the very embodiment of battle, strong, fierce, and relentless. His armor, a symbol of invincibility, shielded him from the dangers of the world, while his stature, powerful and imposing, commanded respect from every soul who saw his image. To gaze upon these depictions was to understand the might of Huitzilopochtli, but also his delicate balance with the sun. For Huitzilopochtli was not just a god of destruction, but also a god of creation. He was the sun itself, shining, burning, and giving life to the world. The rays that emanated from his body were like arrows of light, piercing through the darkness, banishing the night, and ensuring that the cycle of life continued. As the sun rose each day, so did Huitzilopochtli rise in the hearts of the people, his warmth and power a reminder of his eternal presence. The Panquetzaliztli, the obsidian-edged sword, was another of Huitzilopochtli's iconic symbols. The sword was a weapon of beauty and destruction, crafted with skill. It was as sharp as a god's will and as deadly as the sun's midday heat. Its edges were lined with razor-sharp pieces of obsidian, a material revered for its strength and sharpness. The Panquetzaliztli was not just a weapon of war, it was an extension of Huitzilopochtli's power, a tool that brought divine justice to the world. When a warrior wielded this sword, he was not merely a mortal, he became a reflection of the god himself, carrying out the will of Huitzilopochtli on earth. With each swing of the Panquetzaliztli, the warrior channeled the power of the god, bringing the force of the sun to bear on his enemies. Each strike, each cut, was a testament to the strength and might of the god of war. And then, there was the shield, a circular, sturdy barrier that protected the warrior and bore the weight of Huitzilopochtli's divine protection. The shield was not simply a tool for defense, it was a symbol of the god's guardianship. It was round, like the sun, reflecting Huitzilopochtli's connection to the celestial body he ruled. Each shield was decorated with intricate designs, often portraying the sun or a warrior in battle. The shield was not just to protect from harm, it was a constant reminder of Huitzilopochtli's presence in every battle. With the shield, a warrior was invincible. It carried the power of the god himself, a tangible connection to the divine. In every symbol of Huitzilopochtli, there was more than just a god's likeness. There was a story, a prayer, a message. Each carving, each sculpture, each painted depiction was a reminder of the god's ever-watchful gaze. These images were more than art, they were spiritual acts, connecting the people to the divine in a way words could not. When the people of Tenochtitlan looked upon the images of Huitzilopochtli, they saw not just a god, but the very embodiment of their culture, their beliefs, and their lives. They saw the god who had guided them through their migration, the god who had given them victory in battle, the god who sustained the very sun in the sky. To understand Huitzilopochtli was to understand the heart of the Mexica people. His symbols were not just representations of power and war, they were representations of the relationship between the Mexica and the divine. Every weapon, every shield, every hummingbird was a piece of the Mexica's soul, a piece of the soul of Huitzilopochtli himself. They saw their lives, their struggles, their victories, and their sacrifices reflected in these images. And in doing so, they found the strength to carry on, to continue fighting, to continue living, and to continue honoring the God who watched over them all. The sun was scorching that day, its blinding light illuminating the great Templo Mayor in Tenochtitlan, where thousands of eyes fixed upon the stone altar. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the drums, deep and steady, echoed like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The people gathered below the towering temple, their breaths held in a collective silence, waiting for what was about to unfold. At the top of the steps, priests, adorned in feathered robes and golden ornaments, moved with an air of solemnity. They had prepared the sacred space for a ritual unlike any other, one that had been passed down for generations. It was the offering of life to the god Huitzilopochtli. In the shadows of the temple, warriors stood, their hearts pounding in unison with the rhythm of the drums. Each one had known what was to come, yet no matter how many times it was done, the weight of the moment always brought a shiver to the spine. To the Mexica, this was no ordinary sacrifice. It was a sacred exchange. For Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun, needed the blood of warriors to sustain his power and to ensure the sun would rise again. Without these offerings, the sun itself could falter. Without this ritual, the world could be swallowed by darkness. The ritual of human sacrifice was deeply ingrained in the Mexico worldview. It wasn't born of cruelty, but of love, a desperate need to nourish the divine and to maintain the fragile balance of life. The warriors who walked to their fate on that day were not victims, they were chosen, honored. They had fought in the wars that kept the Mexica Empire growing, and in return, they would be given the highest gift, an opportunity to feed the god they revered. Their sacrifice was a sacred act, one that connected the heavens to the earth. With each warrior that lay upon the stone altar, the priests would chant their prayers, invoking Huitzilopochtli's name. The sun blazed above them, the heat of its rays seeming to intensify as the ritual reached its peak. The heart of the warrior, still beating with the life force of battle, would be taken in an instant. Blood poured out, dark and rich, flowing down the sides of the temple, spilling into the earth below. It was not just the shedding of blood, it was the offering of life itself, life that would return to the god who fought against the darkness, who protected the sun. The Mexica believed that the sun was not eternal on its own. Huitzilopochtli needed the energy of the sacrifice to keep the sun moving across the sky. Every drop of blood was an offering, a pledge of loyalty, a promise that the light would continue to shine and that the warmth of the sun would not be swallowed by the shadows of the night. In their minds, each sacrifice was a necessary act to keep the world turning, to keep life flowing. Without these sacrifices, the god would weaken, and the sun might never rise again. The myths surrounding these sacrifices were as ancient as the Mexica people themselves. It was said that when the first sun was created, the gods gave up their own lives to sustain the world. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, gave his blood to create the sun and the moon, but for the sun to continue its journey across the sky, the gods knew that human blood must be offered in return. This eternal exchange of life was central to the survival of the world, and it was Huitzilopochtli, the mighty warrior god, who stood at the center of this cycle. He was the one who protected the sun, who fought the forces of darkness and night, and who needed the warrior's sacrifice to rise each morning. As the priests would chant the praises of Huitzilopochtli, their voices rising in unison, the warriors would close their eyes, knowing their blood would join the flow of history, joining the many who had given their lives before them. For them, the offering was not just a duty, it was an honor. They were part of something greater than themselves, a part of the endless cycle of life and death that bound the earth and the heavens. Their blood would serve a higher purpose, to ensure that Huitzilopochtli's power remained strong, and that the sun would continue its journey across the sky, providing light and warmth to the world below. These were not empty rituals, they were a profound expression of faith. To the Mexica, the act of sacrifice was a sacred bond between the people and the gods. It was an exchange of energy, a recognition that life and death were intertwined. Huitzilopochtli's hunger was not a demand, it was a necessity. His constant battle against the darkness of night could only be sustained by the sacrifice of life. Without it, the world would fall into chaos, and the sun would fade. The warriors who gave their lives in Huitzilopochtli's name were not lost, they became part of the eternal cycle, their spirits forever tied to the light of the sun. As the blood spilled down the steps of the Templo Mayor, it was as though the god himself received the offering. The drums beat louder, and the people below would raise their arms to the sky, feeling the presence of Huitzilopochtli fill the air. In that moment, they knew the sun would rise again. They knew that the god of war had been fed, and with each sacrifice, the world would continue to turn. The darkness would be held at bay, and the warmth of the sun would bring life to the earth once more. The ritual was over, but the memory of it would live on, just as the god lived on, and every breath taken under the sun, and every moment of warmth felt on the skin, and every heart that beat beneath the stars. It was a story of devotion, of love, of sacrifice, and of the enduring power of the sun, a reminder that in the darkest of times, light would always return. The night was still, but the air was alive with the whispers of the past. The stars above shone bright and piercing, each one a flicker of light with a story, a memory that stretched beyond the limits of time. And among them, the constellation of the Southern Cross glowed brightly, a perfect symbol of what had been, the warriors who had fallen in the name of Huitzilopochtli, and the power they carried with them into eternity. The 400 warriors, fierce and proud, had been loyal to the god of war, the one who would always stand strong against the encroaching darkness. Their story began not on the earth, but in the heavens, where they would become stars themselves, forever shining as proof of their devotion, their strength, and their sacrifice. They had been chosen by Huitzilopochtli to accompany him into battle, his most trusted and loyal warriors, who would fight by his side in the most dangerous of conflicts. But what was truly remarkable about them was not just their courage or their devotion, it was their ability to transcend time, to live on as stars in the night sky. The Southern Cross, the constellation that would forever bear their name, was their reward. This cluster of stars was a constant reminder to the Mexica of the power of Huitzilopochtli and the warriors who had fought with him. But for those who looked up at the night sky, it was more than just a group of shining dots. It was a symbol of unwavering loyalty, of selfless sacrifice, of warriors who had given everything to their god and their people. As the story goes, these warriors were not ordinary men. They were the fiercest of the Mexica, who had battled and conquered alongside Huitzilopochtli himself. Each one had been chosen for his strength, his courage, and his undying devotion to the god of war. They were the kind of warriors who would follow their god into the heart of darkness, knowing that no matter the cost, they would fight for their people, their land, and the sun that rose every day above them. When the time came for them to fall in battle, their loyalty did not end. They did not fade into oblivion, but instead, their spirits were carried into the heavens by Huitzilopochtli. There, they were transformed into stars, symbols of the power and protection that they had offered to their people in life. The constellation of the Southern Cross was their eternal home, forever guiding the Mexica through the darkest nights, their bravery lighting up the sky just as they had lit up the battlefield. To the Mexica, the Southern Cross was more than just a collection of stars, it was a living, breathing memory of the warriors who had sacrificed everything. Their light shone brightly for all to see, not as a distant, cold reminder, but as a sign that Huitzilopochtli's protection was eternal. The 400 warriors had fought not just for their people, but for the very sun that gave life to the world. And now, they were the guardians of that sun, forever ensuring its place in the sky. The Mexica people believed that the warriors, now transformed into stars, continued to watch over them. Every time a Mexica gazed up at the night sky, they saw not just the stars, but the faces of their ancestors, their protectors. They saw the 400 warriors, still fighting beside their god, ensuring that the sun would always rise, that the world would remain balanced, and that the Mexica would never be forgotten. There was a deep connection between the Mexica and these celestial beings. When the Mexica faced danger, when they went to war, it was as if they could feel the presence of these 400 warriors beside them, urging them on. The Mexica warriors who went into battle knew that the stars of the Southern Cross were not just distant lights, they were the spirits of their ancestors, their guides, their strength. The battlefields of the Mexica were never just about land or power. They were about honor, devotion, and sacrifice. And Huitzilopochtli stood at the center of it all, a protector not just of the sun, but of those who fought in his name. The 400 warriors who had been chosen by him were the embodiment of this devotion, their spirits forever intertwined with his. Their light in the sky was a constant reminder that the sun would never fade, that Huitzilopochtli's people would always have protection, and that the warriors who gave everything would live on forever. The Southern Cross was not just a constellation. It was a symbol of hope, of strength, of the unbreakable bond between the Mexica and their gods. Every time the stars shone brightly in the night sky, the Mexica knew that their warriors were still with them. They were part of something greater, a living connection to the past, to the warriors who had given their lives, and to the God who had promised to protect them. It was a bond that stretched beyond the earth, beyond time. In the stillness of the night, beneath the glow of the Southern Cross, the Mexica could feel the presence of those 400 warriors, forever standing guard, forever fighting in the name of Huitzilopochtli. And they knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that their God would always be with them, leading them, guiding them, and ensuring that the sun would never fade from the sky. The battlefield was a haze of dust and smoke. The air burned with the scent of sweat and the sharp tang of blood. The cries of warriors, the clash of weapons, and the sound of drums reverberated through the heart of Tenochtitlan. This was a moment in history where the fate of an empire rested on the outcome of battle, and the Mexica people stood at the center of it all, their spirits held high by the presence of their god, Huitzilopochtli. Before every campaign, before every battle, the warriors of Tenochtitlan would gather. They would stand in reverence, their eyes turned upward to the towering temple dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun. The sun that rose each day, burning bright in the sky, was his gift, and in return, the Mexica offered their devotion. They called upon him before every campaign, believing that with his favor, they could conquer anything, defeat any enemy. It was his will they followed, his path they walked, and in the midst of every battle, they felt his presence by their side, guiding them, empowering them. The city of Tenochtitlan, once a small settlement, had grown into an empire that stretched across the Valley of Mexico. It had been built upon the foundation of war, sacrifice, and divine favor. Every stone of the city, every building, every temple had been laid with the blood of warriors who had fought in Huitzilopochtli's name. The Mexica knew that their empire was only as strong as their connection to their god, and they invoked his blessing before every major conflict. It was not just a ritual, it was a lifeline. Before the drums began to beat, before the first arrow was released, the high priests would make their way to the temple. There, they would offer prayers and sacrifices to Huitzilopochtli, asking for his guidance, his protection. The warriors, hearts racing, would kneel before the sacred altar, offering their own promises and prayers. They believed that the god could hear them, that his spirit would fill their hearts with strength. And so, they would march into battle with the belief that their god was walking beside them, his fiery strength flowing through their veins. Huitzilopochtli's power was known to be immense, and the Mexica believed that when they were favored by him, victory was assured. The god had already proven himself time and again. It was said that he had led them out of the deserts, guiding them toward Tenochtitlan with the promise of a future empire. His presence had shaped their very lives, their culture, and their destiny. Now, as they marched into the heart of battle, it was his protection they called upon, his guidance they sought. The Mexica fought fiercely, each warrior thinking of Huitzilopochtli's strength, his might. They believed that they were not just fighting for themselves, but for the sun to rise each day, for the prosperity of their people, and for the very life of the world. They felt his spirit surge within them as they clashed against their enemies, their blades cutting through the air like lightning. With every strike, with every victory, they honored their god, believing that it was his power that allowed them to triumph. The battles fought by the Mexica were not just about territory or conquest. They were about honor, about fulfilling a divine destiny. Every campaign, every war, was a chance to prove their loyalty to Huitzilopochtli, a chance to show the world that they were worthy of his favor. And in return, the god would bless them with victory. In their minds, it was not just bloodshed, it was a sacred right, a way to ensure the survival of their people, their city, and the sun itself. Huitzilopochtli's influence extended far beyond the battlefield. His role in the Mexica's rise to power was undeniable. As the god of war, he not only shaped the destinies of individual warriors, but also the fate of the empire itself. The Mexica believed that as long as Huitzilopochtli watched over them, their empire would continue to grow, to expand. Every victory added to the glory of Tenochtitlan, and with each triumph, the god's power was strengthened. They knew that the more they fought in his name, the more they would prove their worthiness to him. And the more they proved themselves, the more they were blessed with victory. But as the empire grew, so did the stakes. The battles became fiercer, the enemy stronger. There were moments when it seemed like the Mexica might be overwhelmed, when the sky darkened, and the sound of war grew too much to bear. But even in the darkest moments, the people of Tenochtitlan turned to Huitzilopochtli. They knew that his favor was not always easy to earn, that his guidance was not a guarantee, but they had faith in his strength. When all seemed lost, when the battles seemed impossible, they would pray, they would sacrifice, and they would fight. And with each victory, they knew they were fulfilling the prophecy. They were building an empire that would stand for generations, an empire that would be remembered by history. The greatness of Tenochtitlan was a reflection of Huitzilopochtli's power, and the Mexica knew that it was his will that had guided them to their destiny. As the sun set over the battlefield, bloodied and worn, the Mexica warriors would kneel in the dust, their heads bowed in reverence. They had fought in the name of Huitzilopochtli, and they had emerged victorious. With the god's blessing, they had claimed another victory, another step closer to fulfilling the divine destiny that had been set before them. They knew that without Huitzilopochtli's guidance, they would be nothing. But with him by their side, they were unstoppable. And so, the legend of Tenochtitlan continued to grow, the empire stretching its influence across the land. The Mexica knew that their god had led them to this moment. And as they looked to the future, they knew that Huitzilopochtli's power would continue to shape their destiny, for as long as the sun continued to rise. The night was thick with anticipation, the stars hanging like jewels in a black velvet sky. All around Tenochtitlan, the city hummed with a quiet, uneasy energy, a sense of something momentous approaching. It was the end of a cycle, a turning point that demanded ritual and renewal. The people gathered, the priests standing at the ready, their hearts heavy with the weight of their duties. They were about to witness the most sacred of all ceremonies, the new fire ceremony. It was a time of both fear and hope, for the world's fate rested upon this ritual. As the people of Tenochtitlan held their breath, their gazes fixed on the great pyramid of the sun, a deep silence enveloped the city. This was a moment that came once every 52 years, when the old fire would be extinguished, and a new flame would be kindled to ensure the sun's continued journey. The Mexica knew the stakes were high. Without the sun, there could be no life. Without Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun, their world would fall into darkness, lost to chaos. The priests, gathered around the great ceremonial fire, held their breath as they prepared the ritual knives, the sacred offerings, and the materials needed for the new fire. The flames were extinguished, and for a brief, terrifying moment, the sun itself seemed to be fading. This was the darkest hour, the moment when the gods would decide the fate of the world. The Mexica believed that at this time, the world was on the brink of destruction. The sun, weary from its long journey, could die unless it was renewed through sacrifice and ritual. In this darkness, it was Huitzilopochtli who would rise once again. The god of the sun, the warrior who had slain his sister Quetzalcoatl, was the key to the sun's rebirth. The people believed that it was through his strength and power that the sun would be reborn, as he fought to keep the darkness at bay. This battle against the night, against the forces that sought to pull the sun from the sky, was eternal. Every night, the sun battled the shadows, and every morning, it rose victorious. The new fire ceremony was a way to renew that eternal struggle, to honor the sun's strength and to make sure that the light would continue to shine upon the earth. In the heart of the ceremony, the sacrifices began. The priests would make offerings of hearts, cutting open the chest of a chosen victim, the blood spilling as the lifeblood of the people was given to the sun god. This act of sacrifice was not cruel or meaningless, it was a sacred gesture. The Mexica believed that only through blood could the sun be renewed. The heart, the seed of life, was the most precious gift they could offer. This was the only way to ensure that the world would not be plunged into eternal darkness. The people believed that the blood spilled in Huitzilopochtli's name would feed the sun, giving it the strength to rise once more. And then, at the moment when the darkness seemed most complete, when all hope seemed lost, the priests would light a new flame. A fire would spring to life in the heart of the ceremony, the embers flickering and glowing in the midnight air. This flame would be the symbol of Huitzilopochtli's victory over the dark forces that threatened the world. It would burn brightly, lighting up the night and giving the people the hope they so desperately needed. The new fire was a sign that the world had been renewed, that the sun would continue to rise, and the cycle of life would continue. The symbolism of fire ran deep in the hearts of the Mexica. Fire was life, fire was transformation, and fire was the force that could both destroy and create. It was the fire of the sun, and the fire of Huitzilopochtli's power, that had guided the Mexica from their homeland in Aztlan to the shores of Lake Texcoco, to the heart of their empire in Tenochtitlan. It was through fire that the Mexica believed they could connect to the divine, that they could offer their sacrifices and receive the blessings of the gods. The flames represented the ongoing struggle between light and dark, creation and destruction, and the promise of renewal in the face of destruction. As the new fire burned brightly, the people of Tenochtitlan knew that they were witnessing something sacred, something that would shape their future for another 52 years. They could feel the power of Huitzilopochtli in the air, a force that connected them all, binding them to the god and to each other. The flames symbolized more than just the sun's return. They symbolized the strength of their people, their devotion to the God who had led them to greatness, and the eternal battle against darkness that would never cease. In the heart of the ceremony, the people would dance and sing, their voices rising to the heavens as they celebrated the sun's rebirth. They would offer their prayers, their hopes, their dreams for the future, knowing that the power of Huitzilopochtli was with them. The sun would rise again, and with it, the promise of another cycle of life, another chance to fight, to grow, and to thrive. As the ceremony drew to a close, the people would gather around the new fire, their faces illuminated by its warmth and light. They would look to the sky, knowing that with Huitzilopochtli's blessing, the sun would rise in the morning and light their world once again. The darkness had been held at bay, and the world had been renewed. For now, they were safe. For now, they could rest. But they knew that the battle would continue. Tomorrow, the sun would rise again, and the struggle against the darkness would begin anew. It was a cycle that would never end, but it was a cycle they had learned to honor, a cycle they believed in with all their hearts. The new fire had given them hope, and with it, they knew they could face whatever challenges lay ahead, as long as they had the power of Huitzilopochtli by their side. The sun sinks lower, the sky painted with deep purples and fiery oranges. The air grows cool, and darkness creeps into every corner of the world. It's a moment of peace, but not for long. For with the setting of the sun, a battle begins, a battle that is fought each night, between the forces of light and the ever-encroaching darkness. And at the heart of this eternal struggle stands Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war, determined to protect the light and the life it brings. As the sun dips below the horizon, the people of Tenochtitlan, their eyes fixed on the skies, know that the world is on the brink of something greater than mere twilight. This is the time when Huitzilopochtli must face the forces of chaos, the monsters and darkness that lurk in the night. The Mexica believed that the sun's journey was not an easy one. Every night, the sun itself fought a battle, one that would determine whether it would rise again in the morning. And it was Huitzilopochtli who led this fight, wielding his strength and his power, pushing against the darkness that sought to devour the light. In this cosmic struggle, the sun's descent marked the beginning of a fight to survive. The forces of night, led by the great darkness itself, were relentless. They pulled at the sun with every ounce of their power, trying to drag it into the abyss of eternal night. But Huitzilopochtli would not yield. He fought with the same fierceness that defined the warrior class of the Mexica. He fought because the sun's light was life itself, and to let it die would be to let the world fall into chaos and destruction. Every day, the sun's journey across the sky mirrored this battle. At dawn, the sun would rise, shining brightly, bringing warmth, life, and hope. But as the day wore on, the sun would begin to lose its strength. It would grow weaker, inching closer to the horizon, where it would again face the terrifying pull of darkness. Yet, with the arrival of night, Huitzilopochtli would gather his strength once more, prepared to defend the sun until the first rays of morning. The sun's death each night was not permanent. It was a temporary surrender, one that would only last until the next battle could be won. The Mexica, who believed that life itself was a constant struggle against forces beyond their control, saw this battle of the sun as a reflection of their own lives. The god who fought against the darkness was their protector, their source of strength. Just as Huitzilopochtli rose each day to defend the sun, the Mexica warriors rose to defend their land, their people, their very existence. The struggles they faced, war, conquest, hunger, disease, were like the nightly battle the sun fought against darkness. They knew that life was a constant fight to survive, to rise again after every fall. Huitzilopochtli's warlike nature was not just a symbol of divine power, it resonated deeply with the Mexica's own experiences. The Mexica people were no strangers to battle. Their world was one of constant warfare, where every victory meant survival, and every defeat meant the potential end of their way of life. The warriors of Tenochtitlan, fiercely devoted to their god, understood the daily sacrifices made to ensure that the sun would continue its journey. Just as the sun had to fight against the forces of night, the warriors too had to fight against their enemies. They were not just fighting for land or power, they were fighting for survival, for the very light that gave them life. The myth of Huitzilopochtli's daily struggle echoed through the lives of the Mexica people. Each day, as the sun rose, it was a sign that their god had won another victory. But with every sunset, there was the reminder that the battle was never over. The Mexica saw the death of the sun each night as a reflection of the hardship and suffering they endured. It was a reminder that no matter how strong they were, darkness could always find a way to challenge them. Yet, just like Huitzilopochtli, they were never willing to let that darkness consume them. There were moments, though, when the people of Tenochtitlan feared that the sun might not rise again. When the night grew long, when the forces of darkness seemed too strong, they would turn to their god for reassurance. They would offer their prayers, their sacrifices, their devotion, asking Huitzilopochtli to fight just one more time, to protect them from the cold, empty abyss of darkness. They knew that it was through his strength that the sun would rise again, just as it was through their own strength that they would endure. In their hearts, they carried the hope that the light would never fully die, that even in the darkest of nights, the sun would always return. In their struggles, the Mexica people saw themselves in Huitzilopochtli's battle. His victories were their victories. His defeats were their reminders to never give up. The daily cycle of life and death, light and darkness, was a story that played out in the lives of the Mexica. But even in their darkest moments, they held on to the belief that they too could rise again, that like the sun, they too could endure. As the stars twinkled above and the last light of the sun faded away, the people knew the battle was far from over. Huitzilopochtli's struggle would continue, just as their own struggles would. The night might fall, but it would never last forever. And in the morning, the sun would rise again, stronger and brighter, just as they would, again and again, in the face of whatever challenges lay ahead. In this eternal cycle, they found their strength. The great city of Tenochtitlan stood proud and powerful, its towering temples reaching for the sky, its streets alive with the echoes of drums and the clash of warriors preparing for battle. But beneath the bustle of everyday life, something sacred and immense held everything together, something that linked the fates of the people to the very heavens above. It was the divine presence of Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war, whose power was felt in every victory and whose guidance was the silent force behind the throne of the emperors. For the rulers of Tenochtitlan, the connection with Huitzilopochtli was more than just a matter of faith. It was the bedrock of their rule. When the emperor stood before his people, his words were not just his own, they were the will of the god. The Mexica believed that Huitzilopochtli chose their rulers, that the emperor was not simply a man but a vessel for the god's power, chosen to lead his people in the same way the god led the sun across the sky, defeating the forces of darkness with every rise and setting. This divine bond shaped the very essence of Aztec kingship. The emperors were not crowned by mortal hands alone. They were chosen by the gods, marked with their blessing. It was the fire of Huitzilopochtli's will that burned through them, making them invincible in battle and wise in governance. Every decision made in the grand palace of Tenochtitlan was seen as a reflection of divine guidance. A ruler who had the favor of Huitzilopochtli would be backed by the very heavens themselves, able to command armies with the strength of the sun and hold sway over enemies with the power of the divine. To be an emperor was to carry the weight of the world on one's shoulders. But it was also to be a warrior, a symbol of Huitzilopochtli's endless battle against the darkness. Each ruler was expected to lead the Mexica to ever greater heights, to conquer new lands, and to extend the empire's reach. Their military conquests were not just about gaining power, they were seen as a sacred duty, a fulfillment of the divine mandate given to them by Huitzilopochtli. With every victory, the emperor proved not just his strength, but his connection to the god. It was through military success that they secured their place in the world, just as it was through the sun's daily victory over the night that the world itself was made whole. Every conquest, every campaign, was infused with the god's will. Before heading into battle, the warriors would offer prayers to Huitzilopochtli, asking for his protection and guidance. They knew that it was not just their weapons that would win the fight, but the god's blessing. The emperor, as the earthly representative of Huitzilopochtli, was the one to lead them into battle, to channel the god's power and unleash it upon the enemy. And so, in the heat of battle, every sword strike, every arrow shot, became a sacred act. The warriors fought not for their own glory, but to honor the god who protected them. The emperor's role was sacred, and his military conquests were seen as the fulfillment of divine will. In the eyes of the people, the ruler's victories were proof that Huitzilopochtli had chosen him, that the god was with him in every fight. The emperor's strength was the strength of Huitzilopochtli himself, and his power was his ability to protect his people, just as the sun protected the earth by rising each day. But Huitzilopochtli's influence was not limited to the battlefield. His power also shaped the very fabric of governance. The emperor was not only a military leader, but a spiritual one, the one who ensured that the people remained in the god's favor. Festivals, sacrifices, and rituals were carried out in his name, and it was the emperor's responsibility to oversee these acts of devotion. By maintaining the favor of Huitzilopochtli, the emperor ensured the prosperity of the Mexica. And when the empire flourished, it was seen as a sign that the god was pleased. The divine mandate given to the emperor was both a gift and a burden. It was a calling that set him apart, making him not just a ruler but a figure of divine authority. He was more than a man, he was a symbol of the god's power on earth. Every action he took was seen as an extension of Huitzilopochtli's will. To question the emperor's authority was to question the very will of the god. In this way, Huitzilopochtli became the cornerstone of Aztec political power, the unshakable foundation upon which the empire stood. In times of peace, the emperor's role was to maintain harmony and order, ensuring that the gods remained pleased and that the sun continued its journey across the sky. But in times of war, the emperor's true power was revealed. Under his leadership, the Mexica would expand, building an empire that stretched across vast territories, and with every conquest, Huitzilopochtli's influence would grow. His favor was the ultimate weapon in the emperor's arsenal. It was said that with Huitzilopochtli on their side, no army could stand against them. The relationship between the god and the emperor was one of symbiosis, each needed the other to survive. The emperor needed the god's blessing to rule, to conquer, to lead. And Huitzilopochtli needed the emperor to carry out his divine will, to ensure that the Mexica Empire continued to thrive. Together, they were an unstoppable force, with the sun's light lighting the way forward, and the emperor's will guiding the people. But with every battle won, with every new land claimed, the burden of leadership grew heavier. The emperor knew that his success was not just his own, but a reflection of the god's will. To fail was to fail the god, and that was a weight that no ruler could bear lightly. In the eyes of the Mexica, the emperor's power was Huitzilopochtli's power, and to disrespect the emperor was to disrespect the god himself. In the grand palace of Tenochtitlan, with the sun hanging high in the sky, the emperor stood as a living embodiment of Huitzilopochtli's divine mandate. The people, their hearts filled with devotion and awe, looked up to him not just as their ruler, but as their protector, the one who held the light of the sun within him. The sun blazes down over the vast city of Tenochtitlan, its golden rays reaching across the sprawling markets, temples, and palaces. But amidst the ordinary pulse of the city, there is a moment, an electrifying shift in the air, when the people come together for something extraordinary. The drums begin to beat, slow at first, then faster, until they vibrate through the stone streets and into the hearts of every listener. The air fills with the hum of voices, the rustling of sacred garments, and the heavy scent of incense as the Mexica prepare to honor their most powerful god, Huitzilopochtli, the warrior sun. The Panquetzaliztli festival is one such time, when Tenochtitlan becomes a living reflection of Huitzilopochtli's glory. For days leading up to the event, the city is transformed. The priests, adorned in their sacred attire, prepare the rituals and offerings. The streets are lined with banners and flowers, each one a tribute to the god of war, whose power gives light to the day and drives the darkness away. This is more than a celebration, it is a solemn promise, a blood pact between the Mexica people and their divine protector. As the sun begins to set, the festival reaches its peak. The people gather in the great temple, the Templo Mayor, where the air is thick with anticipation. It is here that the true weight of their devotion will be shown. Huitzilopochtli demands sacrifice, not for mere glory, but for the survival of the sun, for the very rhythm of life itself. The people know this. They know that without the blood offerings, the sun would falter and darkness would take over the world. In the center of the temple, a sacred fire burns brightly. The flames leap high into the air, as if the fire itself is eager to reach out to the heavens. The ritual sacrifices are not just a means to appease the god, they are a reminder of the power of the sun and its eternal struggle against night. The warriors, brave souls who fought in the name of Huitzilopochtli, are honored first. Their hearts will be offered to the god in exchange for the god's blessing on the people and the city. As the priests chant ancient words, the captives, often taken in the flower wars, are brought forward. Their faces are painted with bright, vivid colors, their bodies decorated with symbols that speak of their lives as enemies. For them, this is the moment of their fate. Their deaths will be a gift, a final act of devotion to the god whose power fuels the sun's rise each day. The priest's hands, steady and resolute, perform the sacred rites. With every stroke of the obsidian blade, a life is taken, and the offering is made. The blood flows, not in grief, but in reverence, for without it, the sun would die. This ritual is not just an offering. It is a reenactment of the cosmic battle between light and darkness. The warriors, their hearts pierced and raised to the sky, become symbols of the sun itself, offering their lives so that Huitzilopochtli may continue to shine. The flames of the fire rise higher, and the people chant in unison, their voices echoing through the temple like a windstorm that threatens to sweep away the shadows. The sacrifice is not just physical, it is a spiritual act that binds the people to their god, to their destiny. But even as the festival reaches its peak, there is a quiet moment of reflection, where the sounds of the drums fade into the background, and the people, their faces lifted toward the sky, pause. In the eyes of the Mexica, these sacrifices were not just acts of violence, they were moments of pure connection with the divine. To them, the death of the captive was not a loss, it was a gift to the god, a transaction that would ensure the survival of their world. Every warrior who died in service to Huitzilopochtli, every captive who offered his life, was like a star in the night sky, a small but vital part of the greater cosmic balance. In this sacred space, the priesthood stands at the center, performing their sacred duties with unwavering devotion. The priests are not just intermediaries between the gods and the people, they are the embodiment of the God's will on earth. Their robes, often decorated with intricate symbols, reflect their connection to the divine. Their chants, carried on the wind, are believed to hold the power to reach Huitzilopochtli's ears in the heavens. It is they who ensure that the rituals are performed correctly, that the blood is spilled in the right way, that the offerings are accepted. The life of the empire depends on their success. The connection between the Mexica and their gods is never more evident than in these moments of ritual sacrifice. For the people, every drop of blood spilled, every prayer uttered, and every offering made is a testament to their belief that the gods walk with them. Without the gods, without Huitzilopochtli's power, they would be nothing. They would be lost in darkness. And so, they give back, offering their hearts, their strength, their very lives, in the hope that the sun will rise again, that the god will continue his eternal battle against the dark. The festivals, with all their splendor and sacrifice, are a reminder of the Mexica's fierce devotion. These are not just rituals, they are lifeblood. For as long as they perform these rites, they believe the sun will continue its journey, the god will continue to protect them, and the empire will thrive. Huitzilopochtli's influence is everywhere, woven into the very fabric of their lives. In the fields, the markets, the homes, and the temples, the people live under the constant gaze of their warrior god. As the Panquetzaliztli festival winds down, and the last sacrifice is made, the people return to their homes, their hearts alight with the hope that the god's favor has been secured. The sun, for now, is safe. Darkness has been kept at bay. And in the quiet, when the fires have died down and the drums have faded, the Mexica know that their bond with Huitzilopochtli is unbreakable, a sacred pact that ensures the survival of the world itself. The sound of battle fades as the warrior's final breath escapes, his heart stopping with the certainty of his fate. In that instant, his spirit is no longer bound by the earth. His body, now still, belongs to the gods, but where does his soul go? What awaits him after this life, where the blood of the battlefield has been spilled in the name of Huitzilopochtli, the mighty sun god? The Mexica believed that life did not end with death, it was only a transformation, a passage into another world, a journey towards a new realm that was as uncertain and mysterious as the night sky. The afterlife was a place of both peril and promise, depending on the path one had walked in life. For those who had lived and died in service to the sun god, the journey was different. These warriors, brave souls who gave their lives for the glory of Huitzilopochtli, were destined for a fate that promised honor, a reward for their courage. The moment a warrior fell in battle, his soul began its journey, guided by the very essence of the god he had fought for. To the Mexica, Huitzilopochtli was not just a protector on earth, he was a guide in the afterlife. His power was not limited to the living, but extended into the spiritual realm, determining the fate of those who had proven their loyalty through sacrifice. The souls of warriors did not journey alone, they were carried by Huitzilopochtli's power to the sun itself, a place where they would be honored for their valor and their sacrifice. But the path to the sun was not an easy one. The afterlife was not a singular realm, but a series of domains, each with its own rules, trials, and rewards. The journey began in Mictlan, the land of the dead. This was not a place of punishment, but a realm of transformation. It was a long and difficult journey, filled with obstacles that only the bravest souls could overcome. The Mexica believed that souls, after passing through this dark realm, would continue their journey toward their final destination. The journey was not for the faint of heart, it required strength, courage, and determination to reach the final reward. For the warriors who had fallen in battle, there was a different fate. They were not bound for Mictlan's shadowy depths, but for the eternal light of the sun. The day after their death, they would embark on the sacred path that led them to Tlalocan, the paradise of the gods, or, more often, the sun itself. This was the final reward for those who had served Huitzilopochtli with unwavering loyalty. The sun was their final destination, where they would join the god in his eternal struggle against darkness. The journey was not swift. It was said that the warrior's soul had to journey for 4 years before it could reach its final destination. The trials were not for the faint-hearted. The warrior would travel through night after night, battling the forces of chaos and darkness, each step bringing him closer to the light. But there was more. The Mexica believed that the fallen warrior would become one of Huitzilopochtli's warriors in the sky. The souls of these brave men would become part of the god's celestial army, riding alongside the sun as it made its daily journey across the sky. They would become the stars, shining as eternal reminders of their strength, their sacrifice, and the glory of Huitzilopochtli. In this sacred transformation, the warrior's life and death became one with the eternal forces of the universe. Their journey wasn't just a passage through the afterlife, it was a reflection of their service to the sun god, an eternal tribute to their devotion and their bravery. Every battle they fought in life, every drop of blood shed, had prepared them for this final journey to the sky. The warriors' honor was not bound to the earth, they were destined for the stars. As the souls of the fallen warriors ascended to their final reward, they were greeted by Huitzilopochtli himself. The god's radiant presence, burning bright and fierce like the sun, welcomed them into his fold. They had fought for him, and now they would fight by his side, forevermore. These warriors would never be forgotten. Their names would live on, their souls woven into the fabric of the cosmos. The Mexica believed that the gods watched over them in life and in death, and that through their service, they could become part of the divine struggle that governed the universe. But not all souls reached the sun. For those whose lives had not been spent in battle, or whose fates had been different, there was another journey to take, one that led them to Mictlan, where they would face the trials of the underworld. There, they would travel through 9 levels, each more difficult than the last, before they could find rest. But for the warriors, the promise of light was theirs, a reward for those who had fought with honor. The Mexica believed that death was not the end, it was a continuation, a new beginning. In battle, warriors fought for Huitzilopochtli to ensure the sun would rise. In death, their spirits became part of the sun's eternal journey. Huitzilopochtli's influence did not end when a warrior fell. Instead, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, a final honor, where the soul of the warrior would continue to battle alongside the god, fighting to keep the world in balance. Through this journey, the Mexica saw their gods as active participants in their lives and deaths. They were never separate from the divine. Even in death, the bond between a warrior and Huitzilopochtli was unbroken. The warrior's soul, having fought for the god on earth, would continue its battle in the afterlife, forever joining the celestial ranks of Huitzilopochtli's warriors. They would not be forgotten. Their light would shine forever. As the stars blinked to life in the night sky, the Mexica could look up and know that their warriors were up there, guiding the sun, protecting the world from the encroaching darkness. In this eternal battle between light and dark, Huitzilopochtli's warriors were the unsung heroes, their names written across the heavens, forever burning bright in the god's honor. The cries of war echo through the air, the thunder of battle mixing with the screams of the wounded. The ground shakes under the weight of a relentless siege. And yet, in the midst of it all, there is a strange silence, a silence that hangs over Tenochtitlan like a heavy cloud. For the first time, the people who had once been certain that Huitzilopochtli's fire would burn forever feel something shift in the air. It is as if their great protector, their god of war, has turned away from them. The Spanish had arrived like a storm, sweeping across the land with weapons and ambition, and with them came the terrifying truth: the Mexica, the proud people of Tenochtitlan, were about to face an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. The Spanish conquistadors, led by Hernán Cortés, were not just warriors, they were a symbol of an unknown power, a force that seemed unstoppable. Their armor glinted in the sun, and their horses thundered across the land, terrifying the people who had never seen such creatures. But it wasn't just the invaders that caused fear, it was the feeling that, somewhere in the heart of it all, Huitzilopochtli had vanished. The Mexica had fought many battles in the name of their sun god. They had shed blood and made sacrifices, confident in their divine support. But now, as Tenochtitlan, the great city built in the center of the lakes, was surrounded and besieged, the people began to wonder, why had their god not come to their aid? Huitzilopochtli, the god who had always been with them, who had fought beside them in countless wars, was now silent. The streets were filled with warriors who had given everything, yet victory seemed more distant than ever. As the city fell deeper into chaos, some questioned whether the god had abandoned them. Was this the end? Had Huitzilopochtli's power waned, or had he simply chosen to turn away? As the Spanish advanced, so too did the devastation. The once thriving Tenochtitlan was being torn apart. The city's magnificent temples, which had stood as symbols of the Mexica's devotion, were now crumbling. The Grand Templo Mayor, dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, was overtaken and desecrated. Its sacred fires that had once burned brightly in honor of the god now flickered in the wind, a quiet mockery of the glory that had once been. And through it all, the people could feel the weight of their god's absence, like a void where their faith had once been firm and unshakable. The people had known the power of the sun, the fiery force that Huitzilopochtli embodied. They had known what it was like to fight with the certainty that the sun itself was with them. But now, as their city was torn apart by invaders who seemed both relentless and implacable, that certainty was slipping away. The warriors, who had fought with so much zeal, began to falter. Their faith in their god, their protector, was shaken by the overwhelming force of the enemy. Could Huitzilopochtli still save them? Or had he left them to face the end alone? The destruction of Tenochtitlan did not come swiftly. It came in waves, each more devastating than the last. The great Mexican army, once so proud, was worn down, exhausted, their spirits broken. The Spanish had brought with them not only weapons, but disease, smallpox that spread like wildfire among the people, leaving death in its wake. The streets that had once been filled with the vibrancy of life now echoed with the hollow sounds of despair. And still, the god of war, the god of the sun, seemed absent. Some whispered that the god had turned his back on them, that their sacrifices, their battles, had not been enough. Others believed that Huitzilopochtli had simply grown tired, that the battle against darkness was one that could not be won. As the final days of the city approached, the Mexica found themselves not only fighting for their lives, but also questioning the very foundations of their belief. In the end, Tenochtitlan fell. The city that had once stood as the heart of the Mexican Empire was no more. The Aztec Empire, which had stretched across vast lands, crumbled under the weight of the Spanish conquest. The great temples fell, and the sun god, who had once been the driving force of their warriors, seemed a distant memory. The streets that had known the rush of triumph now lay silent, as the last vestiges of Mexican power disappeared into the shadows of history. The fall of Tenochtitlan marked the beginning of a new era, one where the Mexica were no longer in control of their fate. The arrival of the Spanish had changed everything. The gods, once so real and so present, seemed to retreat into the distance, their power no longer visible in the lives of the people. The Mexica had fought for their god, but now, as their city lay in ruins, it was unclear what had become of that divine protection. Some held on to hope that Huitzilopochtli had simply withdrawn temporarily, waiting for a time to return. But for many, the truth was a bitter one: the god they had worshipped so fiercely had not appeared to save them. Yet, even as the Mexica's world crumbled, the shadow of Huitzilopochtli's legacy lingered. The rituals, the sacrifices, the devotion, they had left a mark on the hearts of the people. And though the world around them was forever changed, the stories of their gods, their warriors, and their battles would live on in their memories, whispered in the wind and carried through the ages. Huitzilopochtli, though absent in the moment of conquest, had shaped the very spirit of the Mexica. And that spirit would not easily fade. As the years passed, the old ways were replaced by new forces, and the Mexica would learn to adapt. They would learn to live under the shadow of the conquerors, but their hearts would always carry the fire of their sun god. And though Huitzilopochtli was no longer the guiding force he had once been, his legacy would continue to live on in the stories of the warriors, in the spirit of the people who had once stood as one beneath his blazing sun. The day the sun seemed to fade, a new light flickered in the shadows. It wasn't the sun's rays, but a spark, one that would refuse to die, even under the weight of foreign gods and foreign hands. The echoes of Huitzilopochtli, the great god of war, of the sun, continued to pulse beneath the surface long after Tenochtitlan had fallen and the mighty empire of the Mexica was no more. When the Spanish arrived, the world changed, and everything that had been built on the ancient ways seemed to crumble. The great temples, the heart of a civilization that had thrived under the watchful eyes of Huitzilopochtli, were razed to the ground. The sacred fires were snuffed out, and the cries of sacrifice that had once filled the air fell silent. But even in the face of destruction, something within the people refused to break, refused to let go of what had been. Huitzilopochtli's image didn't disappear with the fall of the empire. It wasn't erased, it was transformed. Slowly, quietly, the god's presence seeped into the corners of the new world. The rituals, once so central to Mexican life, were silenced or replaced, but the spirit of the god, his strength, his fire, remained in the hearts of the people. It lingered like a quiet prayer whispered in the winds that blew across the land. In the years that followed the conquest, the Mexican people, now living under the rule of the Spanish, found themselves at a crossroads between worlds. They had lost so much, but they were not lost themselves. And in their struggle to hold on to what they had been, they began to weave something new, something unexpected. The old ways did not die, they adapted. The worship of Huitzilopochtli, buried under layers of foreign belief, transformed into something that could survive, even in the face of adversity. Catholicism, with its foreign gods and saints, arrived like a flood. But within the new religion, something familiar was hidden. The Mexican people began to see their God in the faces of new saints. They began to make connections between the warrior god who had once blazed across the sky and the figures that now stood in the churches. And so, the image of Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war, began to subtly shift. The sacred warrior, the one who had battled the forces of darkness each day, was now seen in figures like Saint James, the patron saint of warriors. The Catholic symbols and saints began to take on a double meaning. The fiery sun god was not gone, he had simply been cloaked in new garments. His spirit was not broken, it lived on in the rituals that had been modified to fit the new world. It wasn't the old world, but it was something that carried the weight of history, the heart of the people, and the strength of survival. Through the blending of these two worlds, a new form of worship was born, one that kept the flame of Huitzilopochtli alive, even as the old ways were buried. His attributes, the burning sun, the warrior spirit, the protector of the people, found new homes in the hearts of those who refused to forget. They did not abandon their gods, they found ways to carry them with them into a future that had no place for the gods of the past. And in the quiet places of Mexico, far from the eyes of the conquerors, the old stories were not forgotten. They were passed down, carefully and quietly, like sacred whispers in the dark. Huitzilopochtli's name was spoken with reverence, his power and strength still felt in the heartbeat of the land. His image was hidden, but never gone. Through the centuries, his presence remained in the deep roots of indigenous culture, in the folk tales, the songs, and the ceremonies that continued, even when the world seemed to change around them. Today, in the remote villages and the bustling cities, the legacy of Huitzilopochtli is still alive. His fire still burns, though it may no longer be seen in the same way. The festivals, once dedicated to the god of war, are now intertwined with new symbols and new celebrations. The rhythm of drums still echoes in the streets, though they may be playing to a different beat now. But in the hearts of the people, the spirit of Huitzilopochtli is ever present, a silent warrior watching over them. Indigenous communities, and their strength and resilience, continue to honor the old ways, even in a world that has changed beyond recognition. Huitzilopochtli's fierce protection of his people lives on in the struggle for cultural survival and the fierce determination to hold onto identity and heritage in the face of centuries of oppression. In the ceremonies and rituals that have been passed down through generations, the people continue to honor the god of war, not as a distant memory, but as a living, breathing force that still guides them today. The story of Huitzilopochtli, once silenced by the thundering roar of foreign invaders, continues to echo through the hills and valleys of Mexico. His fire never truly died. It was carried, quietly, through the centuries, finding its way into the hearts of the people who refused to forget, who refused to let go of the power that once shaped their world. Through syncretism, through survival, the god of war lives on, not as a forgotten myth, but as a symbol of strength, resilience, and the unbreakable will of the people. The flame that once blazed across the sky is not gone, it burns in the heart of every person who carries the legacy of their ancestors. It burns in the rituals, in the memories, in the quiet pride of a people who know that no matter how many years pass, their God will always be with them. As the sun dips below the horizon, a silent battle wages in the sky. Each day, the forces of darkness rise, threatening to consume the light. Yet, every morning, the sun returns, strong and unwavering, pushing the night away once more. This endless struggle, the fight between light and darkness, is not just a natural cycle, it is a story woven into the fabric of time itself. And at the heart of this eternal battle stands a warrior, one whose power and influence transcend centuries. Huitzilopochtli, the god of war, the sun, and the people, endures, his legacy carried not just by the ancient stones of Tenochtitlan but by the pulse of every soul who draws strength from the sun's return each day. Even in modern times, Huitzilopochtli's presence looms large, not as a figure confined to the myths of old, but as a symbol that continues to guide and inspire. His eternal battle against the forces of night speaks to something timeless within us all, the struggle between light and darkness, order and chaos, good and evil. Every day, when the sun rises, it is Huitzilopochtli's power that pushes back the darkness, and in doing so, he reminds us of the strength within ourselves to face the challenges and chaos of life. The myths surrounding Huitzilopochtli have always held a profound resonance, their lessons enduring across the ages. His unyielding drive to protect his people, to battle the forces of darkness that sought to swallow the light, mirrors the struggles each of us faces, no matter where or when we live. In a world that is often marred by uncertainty and fear, Huitzilopochtli's strength offers a beacon of hope. He shows us that no matter how powerful the forces against us may seem, there is always a light that will rise again. The god of the sun, with his fierce determination and warlike spirit, teaches us that even in our darkest moments, we are capable of finding the strength to overcome. His battle is not just one of survival but of triumph, a reminder that we can face adversity with courage and resilience. The daily return of the sun is a testament to the power of persistence, of the unrelenting force of light that refuses to be extinguished. But Huitzilopochtli's significance is not merely symbolic, his power lies in the way his story shapes our understanding of the world. Just as he led his people into battle, fighting not only for their survival but for the continuation of the cosmos itself, his myth speaks to the importance of purpose. It's a reminder that we, too, must fight for what matters, whether it is for our families, our communities, or our very existence. In a time when the world feels divided and chaotic, the lessons of Huitzilopochtli are more relevant than ever. His role as a protector, a guide through times of strife, resonates deeply in the modern world. For the Mexica people, Huitzilopochtli was the embodiment of their most fundamental beliefs, strength, courage, and the enduring power of the sun. But his influence stretches far beyond that ancient civilization. In contemporary culture, his legacy is alive in the rhythms of everyday life. Whether we acknowledge it or not, the sun's daily rise and fall is a constant reminder of the balance between light and dark, of the push and pull between order and chaos. Huitzilopochtli's eternal battle lives on in the hearts of those who continue to fight for justice, for peace, for the preservation of what is good and true. In the struggles of our modern world, it's easy to feel as though we are overwhelmed by the forces of darkness, by hatred, violence, or injustice. Yet, Huitzilopochtli's myth provides a guidepost, a way to navigate through the storm. The battle he fought against the forces of chaos is not just a story of old, it is a blueprint for overcoming the struggles that define our own lives. His warlike nature, his refusal to let the darkness consume what he cherished, speaks to the resilience that exists within each of us. We may not wield a sword or fight in battle, but we face our own struggles every day, whether it's standing up for what's right, fighting through personal challenges, or simply refusing to let the weight of the world crush our spirit. In today's world, Huitzilopochtli's relevance is woven into the fabric of the human experience. His influence can be felt in the way we confront adversity, and how we face the uncertainties of the future, and the fierce desire to protect what we love. The very forces he fought against, darkness, chaos, destruction, are still present today, lurking in the corners of our lives, threatening to overwhelm us. But just as he stood strong against those forces, we, too, are called to stand firm, to rise against the tide and push back against the darkness that threatens to engulf our world. As the sun sets each day and the shadows creep in, the story of Huitzilopochtli reminds us that this battle is not over. It may be an ancient story, one told by the fires of Tenochtitlan, but it is one that still has power today. Every sunrise is a victory, every day is a chance to continue the fight, to rise again, to find light in the darkness. And just as the Mexica people once drew strength from the god of the sun, we too can find strength in the knowledge that the battle continues, that the light will return, and that the spirit of Huitzilopochtli endures in every act of courage, every moment of resilience, every fight for what is right.